Okay, let's open in a word of prayer. One second here. Okay. Lord, thanks for this day. We pray that you'll bless our time together. Help us always keep in mind as we discuss some pretty difficult topics that ultimately you're in your control and that we were warned of all these things in advance. So bless us, bless our time together today. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, we're going to call this Welcome to the New World Disorder. And again, our disclaimer that generative artificial intelligence was not used in the research or preparation of this update. Although, you know, there's so much stuff that goes on some weeks that it's very tempting to just say, hey, would you just do this for me? Take a look at a couple of the ones that I've done on YouTube and do this. We talk about the convergence of events, how everything is happening very quickly. It's hard to sort through. So we talk about acceleration, convergence, logistics, understanding. Just a reminder, I'm going to be doing a conference in Calgary, Canada, May 5th and 6th, ldbc.ca, and then also in Scotland, I'll be speaking June 16th to 18th, I believe. You can go to moriel.org and register for that if you want. And I'll also be doing a conference down in Roundwall, Texas, I think. What? Hill. Round Hill? I think it's Roundwall. It's somewhere down in Texas. It gets you within 1,000 miles, you know, so it's on the east side of Dallas. Rockwall, Texas. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Rockwall, Texas. That's being put on by Hope for Our Times. And I don't know if that's up on their website yet or not. So I'll be doing those. That's the last weekend in August. Perfect time to go to Texas. We talk about this a lot that, you know, I've watched prophecy teachers for a long time. I've been teaching on it for a long time. And I've noticed that people have changed some of their views over time. You know, we sort of joke that the 30 minutes of silence that's mentioned in Revelation is to allow all the prophecy teachers to update their charts to conform to what actually just happened. That's very possible. But Daniel chapter 12, and it's also in Daniel chapter 11, it talks about the fact that at the end, in this last time, there will be people who will understand. And Daniel, the first couple verses of Daniel chapter 12 talk about people will run to and fro. Now, there's two ways to look at that. To and fro could mean everybody's running around, everybody's going every place, everybody's traveling. And if you've traveled much lately, you know that airports are full. But there was a couple years where people really weren't running around that much. But I think the deeper meaning of the text is that people will go back and forth through the book looking at all these prophecies. And some prophecies that people thought were dead and gone will suddenly come to life, and we'll say, oh, so that's how that's going to happen. And this is the way Bible prophecy is always unfolded. And sometimes it's not so much being able to tell exactly what's going to happen, but to recognize it when it does and say, okay, now I see that this is what the passage was talking about. And I think that's what's going to happen in the near future. So let's look at a few things. I've got some cultural, religious things. Then we'll talk about some artificial intelligence things that I think are pretty important. That seems to be a very hot topic. Then we'll talk about the Middle East, and specifically Israel. So this is a meeting that's coming up, the Parliament, 2023 Parliament of the World's Religions. And I guess it's going to be in Chicago. Good luck. Why are they choosing Chicago with... I used to go to Chicago all the time. I've tried a number of cases in Chicago. I don't know that I'd want to go back. I've seen what I need to see, and up there, I don't think there's anything new added. A few years ago, Pam and I were coming back from Minnesota, and we I missed a turnoff where there was construction on the Dan Ryan, and I ended up on one of the worst streets on the south side of Chicago. And to get back to the next freeway, we had about 2.5 miles, 3 miles to drive. And I was nervous. I don't usually get too nervous. I used to go to New York and take the subway everywhere. I don't know that I would do that now. I just don't think it's safe. So this is going to be the Parliament of World Religions in this year, a call to conscience, defending freedom and human rights. Listen to what the description is. Reverend HPS, I have no idea what does that mean? High priestess? I don't know. Phyllis Carrot is addressing the urgent theme of the 2023 convening this August, defending freedom and human rights against the rise of authoritarianism, urging people of faith to put a stop to individuals, groups, and states attempting to misappropriate religions to justify the unjustifiable. Now, do you think that there's going to be a lot of pro-evangelical Christian topics and discussions at this conference? I'll be surprised if there's one. Now, I have some friends, they have a tendency to like to go to these things. And I like to go sometimes. I read newspapers and publications that I don't even come close to agreeing with, just because I want to know what the enemy is thinking. And so if you want to get them all in one place on the religious side, this is the place. And you will find a lot of pagan imagery and that type of thing. I think Carl Techribe and some other friends went to one that took place in Toronto, I think it was a few years ago. And the imagery that was used was just absolutely shocking. I'd have to go back and dig out some of the pictures of the art that they were using at this thing. It was just absolutely shocking, pagan, and demonic. I mean, there was just no other way about it. Speaking of religion, we always had these people running around, climate change, we're all going to die. So everybody has their apocalypse. So the climate change people, they have their apocalypse because it's a religion. Why is it a religion? Because there's some things that just aren't provable. The whole thing is crazy. For example, this week, the Obama administration announced that by 2032, 70% of all cars sold in the United States are supposed to be electric. And on my trip to the UK, I was going to rent a car, and I'm looking at the cars, and they have manual transmission or electric. That was pretty much all the rental cars were. And so then I'm sort of sitting thinking there like, okay, now I have to look up and see what's the range on the car and where am I going to be, and then I'm going to be someplace where I can plug it in. I saw a video of a guy who has an electric car, and he says, if you're thinking about buying one of these things and you want to go over 100 miles from home, you're out of your mind. Yeah, I mean, I think they're cool and everything, and if you want to buy one, that's fine. Just what's the old one? You see the videos of the diesel-powered generator out helping a Tesla along the highway. They pull it. So here, this is the faculty of the University of Helsinki has just awarded an honorary doctorate on Greta Thunberg. Now, was it for science? Was it for climate change policy? No, it was for theology, which proves the point that a lot of us have been saying all along, that this whole thing is a religion. And so when this lady at the Parliament of World Religion says, well, we need to stop doing things that people just to justify their religions, lady, that's exactly what you do. So remember, the rule of the left, about the left, is that whatever they accuse you of, they're doing it. So that's certainly in the top 3 rules of life that you can help to get through these things. So the state of Washington seems to be falling along the state of California. Washington is beautiful. I love it. I can remember being in downtown Seattle and up on the top floor, the tallest building in Seattle, doing some depositions one day. And it was spectacularly clear blue sky. You could see all the Olympia Mountains all the way out to all the way up Puget Sound out to the Pacific. And you could see all the mountains, Mount Hood, Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier. Just spectacular. But I also read this week that there are concerns that there is an active earthquake fault called the Cascade Fault right there along the coast that's very active. Some of the scientists are saying that if this thing ever cuts loose, it will be the worst earthquakes in human history. By the way, I may mention it later, but remember the earthquakes in Turkey? I haven't seen this reported anywhere except in the Jerusalem Post. There was a Chinese study that came out about the earthquakes in Turkey. And the earthquakes, they said that, let me pull up the article here. So it's in Friday's Jerusalem Post. And the title of the article is, Turkey Quakes, probably the most powerful ever recorded on land in human history. Now, listen, you see people talk about Yellowstone, and if it blows, goodbye USA, the Cascade Fault. And the next couple stories I'm going to tell you about what, I don't even have time to get into what Oregon's doing. They're doing the same thing. California's doing it. And we know there's these major faults along there, and now Washington is doing it. They're really risking the wrath of God. I don't subscribe to the fact that, for example, the earthquakes in Turkey were caused by the United States. I mean, I saw somebody made a comment on a post I made this week. Sometimes God intervenes. And I think if we're always subscribing it or making it the fault of somebody that we can point to, and nobody ever talks about God, maybe God is judging things. Maybe God had a reason for the earthquakes in Turkey. So I think when we try to make it the fault of human agencies all the time, we diminish God intervening. And what did Jesus say? That there would be earthquakes in many places. And now we're seeing a lot of information coming out about concerns about some of the most powerful earthquakes could happen that the world has ever seen. And that in many places where these earthquakes occur, they're way overdue. And what happens when they all cut loose? And so in light of that, this is a post from, I think this is a left-wing, well, yeah, Washington Senate Democrats. The Democratic Party ceased to exist a few years ago. Victor Davis Hanson had a good article about that this week. They've been taken over by essentially the spirit of the Jacobins. The Jacobins were a group that came out of the revolution in France. And the result of that was, by the way, the great loving leftists, the Jacobins, 300 or 350,000 people in France were beheaded. Because and some of them were people who, wait a minute, we agree with you on a lot of things, but they weren't strong enough in their view, their left-wing views. But here's a couple of pieces of legislation that were enacted in Washington this week. First one is House Bill 1469. And look at what the tweet says. Breaking, the Senate just voted to safeguard reproductive and gender-affirming care with HB 1469. The SHIELD law protects patients and providers from dangerous extremist laws being passed in other states. So, do you think who has a better chance of getting invited to the Parliament of World Religions? The people in Texas and Florida or Tennessee that have said, no, we're not going to do these surgeries that mutilate children. And then immediately come out and say, well, there are no children being mutilated. And then you see these kids. Yeah, when I was 14, I went to the doctor and they took my breast off. They gave me hormones to shut down. I went into early menopause at 27. I was just reading a story about that this morning. So those are the people that they don't want to protect. Now, some people are trying to protect them, and they're the ones that people like this at the Parliament of World Religions are going to say, oh, you evil people. And so what they're doing in Washington, the first thing they're doing is, if you live in a state where they have laws that you're not allowed to have gender-affirming care, which means you can have your body mutilated as a minor, very often without the notice to the parents. Oh, they don't do that, John. You want to know? Just wait till you see the next statute that they put in. So what they say is if you run away and you come to Washington, they now have a shield law there. In fact, this is what the law says. If your parents sue in the state where you lived, or even in Washington, and they want to have a subpoena issued to get the records about the medical care of their child, there's a shield law. That's why they called this the shield. You can't get those records even as a parent of what they're doing to your child. That's Washington. That's law number one that passed within the last few days. And then this lunatic, Marco Lila's legislation to protect transgender and at-risk youth seeking gender-affirming or reproductive care. So they kind of get it all. They get abortion. You know, if you come to Washington to get an abortion and you're a minor, we'll get it for you. No questions asked. And nobody's going to ever be able to sue for people who did this to you. We're on your side. We're doing this for you. We're mutilating you. We're killing your child for you. And that's what it is. So he says, Senate Bill 5599 affirms that trans youth are protected in Washington state by removing barriers to safe shelter. And so you see the act here, and this is a tweet from a person who opposed it. Last night, Washington state passed SB 5599, which allows the state to legally take children away from their parents if they don't consent to their child's gender transition surgeries. All Democrats voted yes. All Republicans voted no. And you see this guy puts up the pink and blue thing, supporting youth and young adults seeking protected health care services. This is atrocious. Now, you can go to the Washington legislative website and you can find links to the hearings that they had on these bills. If you're prone to depression and that type of thing, don't go watch this stuff. But you can find it. And they're talking about the fact that, well, children run away, and our goal is to reconcile the parents and children, but the children have left because they need to have this care. And so we are all about reconciliation. They are such bold-faced liars that they care about these kids. This is a religious, demonically inspired agenda that they're trying to push. I don't think that my father died 32 years ago. I wonder what would happen if he came back now and he saw this. Because, listen, he was a big Bible prophecy guy. He loved to teach about Bible prophecy. He talked on Romans 1. I heard messages on it. I remember them. But I don't think any of us really thought that something like this so wicked would come about and would have the support maybe of the majority of the people in the country. I'm just saying, if you live along a fault line that's overdue and you're putting this garbage out as a law in your state, then you probably ought to be prepping on a pretty significant degree, to a pretty significant degree. So here's a mother. This is just a minute clip. She testified at the hearing against these bills, specifically 5599 that was just passed the other day. And so listen to what she says and what happened to her and her child, and understand that the legislation was to take her completely out of the picture. Why? Because she was concerned about her kid. Listen to what happened.
Appreciate it. Next up is Julie Barrett. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Wilson and members of the committee. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to testify before you this morning. Julie Barrett, founder of Conservative Ladies of Washington, speaking in opposition to Senate Bill 5599. 2 years ago, my daughter had to be rescued by 8 Seattle police officers from a homeless youth shelter. She was not homeless. She was in a mental health crisis, and I spent 10 days trying to gain access to my child, who was in dire need of psychiatric help. The shelter staff had been working on filing a change petition for my child, then 14, and had also gotten her an attorney from LCYF, all in an effort to terminate my parental rights so that I could not, quote, full consent and get her the help she needed. In fact, they rewarded her with cash when she refused to go to her own pediatrician with a family friend. The staff intentionally alienated my child from her loving family, exacerbating her trauma and unstable mental condition. This bill takes that one step further. A shelter like this would be able to give vulnerable youth like my daughter access to irreversible, gender-changing surgeries or hormones. This bill allows adults to prey on special needs children or children with trauma, mood disorders, and other mental health issues. Parents know their children better than anyone. We know their medical and mental history. Shutting out this critical relationship and doing irreversible procedures is destructive and often deadly to these children. This is an assault on our children, as this bill would allow, based on a compelling reason, which is a youth that has been convinced to get gender-affirming services, to cut parents out of the decision-making process. Minor children cannot consent to these kinds of procedures, and they can never go back and undo the damage they cause. Please do not let this bill get out of committee. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
The insanity of a culture where a kid can't go buy an e-cigarette or drive a car, but they can go to somebody without their parents' knowledge, parents who love them and are trying to raise them, and have body parts cut off and given hormones to block puberty, and that we don't even know the long-term results of that. And country after country around the world is saying, we're not going to do this. In the United States, we got states doing it all over the place, and we got these lunatics in the White House and the Biden administration pushing it. It's demonic. It's a judgment of God on our country. Pray for these kids. It's unbelievable. In the Atlantic, a former evangelical, let's see, well, I think her name is Sarah Jones. She was raised in an evangelical Christian home. She wrote an article. Here, let me get this off of here for a second. She wrote this article in the Atlantic. Children are not property. The idea that underlies the right-wing campaign for parents' rights. This is a demonically inspired, wicked article. This person, raised Sarah Jones, will burn for eternity in hell unless she repents. Guaranteed. This is so maddening. Look at what the article says. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it, the book of Proverbs says. To certain right-wing Christians, the concept is simple. A child can be broken or stamped into shape, much like any other domesticated animal, though all parents hope they'll pass their values on to their children. For some, that hope is more of a mandate. My own parents believed that Proverbs is the word of God, and they believed, too, that a righteous upbringing would produce an adult in their image. Who can blame them? The idea that a child should replicate her parents does not belong only to conservative Christianity or to religion or law. Yeah, all of you lunatics out here are pushing this. You want your kids like this. You celebrate it. How can you take a 4-year-old to a drag queen story hour? And if you tell the truth about what they're doing to those kids, you get banned off social media. A proverb is common wisdom, and lately this one is hard to escape. Authoritarianism is gospel to modern conservatives. Nowhere is that clearer than in their assaults on children. It is not an assault on your children to protect them from something. You're a moron if you believe that. What is true is you are cutting off children's body parts. You are altering their chemical hormonal makeup. You're the one who's assaulting them. Rule of life. I don't know, it's in the top 3. It's trending to number 1. The left will always accuse you of doing what they're doing. This is so maddening. I shouldn't have had that extra caffeine this morning. Here's a study that came out. This is from Journal of Human Development. And I'm trying to look, I can't remember the date on this. It's a recent one. It says this: the gender affirmative model, what we know and what we aim to learn. And it has people from Northwestern, Chicago Feinberg School of Medicine, University of California, San Francisco Medical Center, Boston Children's Hospital, etc. And they go through this article and they say, listen, we don't know on a lot of this. There's a very famous guy, his name is Paul or Peter McHugh, used to be at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. He was the head of psychiatry there in their gender reassignment surgery. That's where the first gender reassignment surgery was ever done in the United States. And under they studied this for years. And what they found was that, there's this myth out there that, well, if you don't affirm them, they'll commit suicide. What they found was that when people had the surgery, they were 20 times more likely to commit suicide. Who cares about people more? Come on. Look at the science. And so at Johns Hopkins, while he was there, they stopped doing them because it was not helping them. They actually took seriously their Hippocratic oath, which said, first, do no harm. Boy, that one's been blown out of the water. Johns Hopkins, that now sponsors things like Event 201 about how to deal with different pandemics. So here they have a couple myths. Here are 2 myths that they have. Myth number 1. So this is what they say: gender-affirming approaches conflate gender identity and gender expression. Therefore, any child who exhibits gender nonconformity is believed to be transgender. We're playing around with these kids. The gender affirmative model, myth number 2, asserts that gender identity and gender expression are immutable and removed from social context or influence. There's a great video out there. You can look it up. It's on Twitter. I've seen it there. Came from TikTok. It was a lady, a doctor talking. She says, we need to look at the social contagion. She goes, when I was young in medical school, anorexia was unheard of in America. And then somebody had it and it was publicized on a national television. And all of a sudden, what do we have? A flood of people claiming anorexia. By the way, I'm not anorexic. Or I've certainly overcome it, right? She said the same thing's going on with this transgender stuff. It was unheard of. Now we have clusters where, and now it's like 20% of youth are identifying this way. And I saw a tweet or a video somebody put up, And this person, I don't know whether it was a guy or gal, some you can tell, like that person who's ruined Bud Light. This is just so, it's almost hard to get the words to describe how crazy these things are. And the guy that I saw in the video was saying it's not people identifying as male or female, their gender assigned. Everybody is really transgender. That's what's normal. Now, I'm going to ask a question. Do you think this is going to change before the Lord comes back? I would say, absent a massive revival, no, it's not. We're going to have to figure out how to deal with it. We're going to have to figure out how to protect our families and children and that type of thing from this onslaught. I'm going to state what I've said before. I've long been an advocate of homeschooling. Now, Pam and I never had children, so we never had to make, it's a tough decision. And it used to be, you were kind of an outlier. But I had secular friends that were in some big law firms here in Columbus, and they homeschooled their kids. And I don't think that they were particularly religious because they saw the problems. This is 30 years ago. Imagine what it's like now. So you're going to have to homeschool your kids, and you might have to homeschool your kids for college pretty soon. Well, I think that's probably a valid concern. This is another thing. This is the Financial Times in London reporting on this. Republicans risk backlash from voters as party steps up abortion restrictions. And it's a big deal. I went to that debate at Fox News the week before the election, the Ohio Senate debate. And the people that were there, that had been invited there to represent the left side of the ledger, they were all concerned about this abortion thing. We just had an election in Wisconsin where the Supreme Court of Wisconsin flipped to pro-abortion. The lady ran on abortion. She's an extreme progressive. She won by 10 points in a state that Donald Trump carried. So I'm not optimistic about 2024, I will tell you, as to whether it's going to change. So we need to pray, work, but understand that the people in the church need to act in a righteous way, and maybe that will help preserve the nation. Now, there's been a number of things that have happened. These are pictures. You've seen there are train derailments, chemical plant explosions. There was a train derailment yesterday. I don't even have a picture of it. I forget where it occurred. Might have been West Virginia. It was in kind of a hilly, mountainous area. And these are happening all over. The left picture is a picture of a chemical plant in Richmond, Indiana. We have some friends who live 25 miles from there, and they had to stay inside, turn off their air conditioner because of what was coming out of this. On the right is the cloud. A dairy farm exploded down in Texas. I think it was called the South Fork Dairy Farm. Here's a picture of the dairy farm. Now, these are the barns. It's kind of interesting, don't you think? There's a lot of cows there. Okay, I want you guys to turn up the sound because the next video has sound on it. And they had an explosion. 18,000 dairy cows were killed. Here's what that looked like. Listen to the sound. Can you hear the cows? Folks, What do you think for people in this last period of human history when the Bible tells us many people will die? What do you think that sound is going to be like? When a whole city is incinerated. Now, I don't know who's doing these. Some people say it's foreign actors. I wouldn't be surprised about that since we're at war with people. Some people say it's people within our own government. You choose which one you want to believe. Something is going on. Something is going on. So I don't know how many people 18,000 cows provide milk and cheese for, but that's a lot of cows. I've seen these out in California where they have, 7,000, 8,000? This is 2.5 times the size of those. It's unbelievable. This morning, or yesterday, this is Brunswick, Georgia, down there in Jekyll Island. A chemical plant. Brunswick is a port city. A lot of food processing plants down there. Wood processing because of the forest around. And it burned. And it's like almost every day in this country. And it just seems like something's not right. So, and I don't want to be trite and say something like, well, what did you think the end times were going to look like? But really, what did you think they were going to look like? Now I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence. Yeah, I've talked a lot about this, so I'm not going to go back and plow old ground, but I have a couple long clips, short, and then 2 long clips, and then some other things about where this is going. So first of all, here's a headline from yesterday's Financial Times. Musk to start AI startup to rival ChatGPT. So Musk with Sam Altman founded a company called OpenAI. OpenAI is the one that's put out these things, and now there's a GPT-4. Microsoft has invested $10 billion, and Musk left a few years ago, and Sam Altman is in charge. I saw an interview recently with Sam Altman on ABC News, and she said, some of this stuff seems kind of scary. What happens if it gets out of control? Oh, I think we might be able to slow that down. She goes, well, what if you think it's just like a 10% chance that it will destroy the world? Well, I think we can push some buttons to slow that down. And it'll be great. That Goldman Sachs came out with a report this week that said economic growth, GDP, is going to go up because of our use of artificial intelligence. And they may be right. They also said in that same report that it would probably result in a number of people around the world losing their jobs. Their jobs would disappear. 300 million people. Now, you can say a lot of those might be lawyers, and that's okay. I get it. Ha ha ha. But it's changing the world. And Musk, so he came out with a letter. The Institute of Future Human Institute or something like that, and said we need to put a pause for 6 months. But when Goldman Sachs comes out with a report, and Microsoft has come out with a report, and they've invested $10 billion, do you really think anybody's going to stop? And then do you think China and Russia are going to stop? We're in an arms race that rivals the nuclear arms race of the Cold War. And the problem is this stuff's available everywhere. I mean, you can get some of these things on your phone and walk around playing with them. I'm going to show you a video. So here's Musk. He's going to be interviewed on Tucker Carlson tomorrow night at 8 p.m. But here's a preview clip, just 20 seconds of what he has to say. Now remember, he's starting up a company to rival these, even though he says we need to put a moratorium on it. So here's what he says.
AI is more dangerous than, say, mismanaged aircraft design or production maintenance or bad car production, in the sense that it has the potential, however small one may regard that probability, but it is non-trivial. It has the potential of civilizational destruction.
So that's the teaser. That's part of the upbeat part of the interview, probably. So you can sleep, tonight and before you watch the show tomorrow. This is a guy named Tegmark. He's can't remember his first name. He's on Lex Fridman's show. He's one of the guys who came out with the letter. He's with this Institute of Human Future or Human Future Institute that Musk is a part of. Yuval Noah Harari. They said we need to put a 6-month moratorium on this. And Lex Fridman, by the way, if you think I'm long-winded, Fridman, he is a very interesting interviewer, kind of geeky, and his interviews go like, this interview is 2 hours and 48 minutes. And it's not even the longest one that he did this week. And they go for 3 hours, 3.5 hours sometimes on these people. And they're fairly dense. So I'm going to play a couple parts of a clip. I may stop them soon. But this is Tegmark, AI guy, transhumanist, supreme, and he's talking about, listen to the term that he uses about what is kind of driving people. Because this is the word that's used within that community.
Get our shit together has shortened.
And it seems like the scary thing about the effectiveness of large language models. So
By the way, I apologize if there's any bad words in here.
And he really showed that the leap from GPT-3 to GPT-4 has to do with just a bunch of hacks, a bunch of little explorations, but with smart researchers doing a few little fixes here and there. It's not some fundamental leap and transformation in the architecture.
And more data and more compute.
And more data and compute, but he said the big leaps has to do with not the data and the compute, but just learning this new discipline, just like you said. So researchers are going to look at these architectures, and there might be big leaps where you realize, wait, why are we doing this in this dumb way?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, this model is 10x smarter.
Yeah.
And that can happen on any one day, on any one Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon. And then all of a sudden, you have a system that's 10x smarter. It seems like it's such a new discipline. It's such a new, like we understand so little about why this thing works so damn well that the linear improvement of compute or exponential, but the steady improvement of compute, steady improvement of the data may not be the thing that even leads to the next leap. It could be a surprise little hack that improves everything.
Or a lot of little leaps here and there because so much of this is out in the open also. So many smart people are looking at this and trying to figure out little leaps here and there. And it becomes this sort of collective race where a lot of people feel if I don't take the leap, someone else will. And it is actually very crucial for the other part of it. Why do we want to slow this down? So again, what this open letter is calling for is just pausing all training of systems that are more powerful than GPT-4 for 6 months. Just give a chance for the labs to coordinate a bit on safety and for society to adapt, give the right incentives to the labs. Because you've interviewed a lot of these people who lead these labs, and you know just as well as I do that they're good people. They're idealistic people. They're doing this first and foremost because they believe that AI has a huge potential to help humanity. And but at the same time, they are trapped in this horrible race to the bottom. Have you read Meditations on Moloch by Scott Alexander?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a beautiful essay on this poem by Ginsberg where he interprets it as being about this monster. It's this game theory monster that pits people against each other in this race to the bottom where everybody ultimately loses. The evil thing about this monster is even though everybody sees it and understands, they still can't get out of the race, right? A good fraction of all the bad things that we humans do are caused by Moloch. And I like Scott Alexander's naming of the monster so we humans can think of it as a thing. if you look at why do we have overfishing, why do we have more generally the tragedy of the commons, why is it that so Liv Boré, I don't know if you had her on your podcast.
Yeah, she's become a friend. Yeah.
Great. She made this awesome point recently that beauty filters
Yes.
that a lot of female influencers feel pressure to use are exactly Moloch in action again. First, nobody was using them, and people saw them just the way they were. And then some of them started using it and becoming ever more plastic fantastic. And then the other ones that weren't using it started to realize that if they want to just keep their market share, they have to start using it too. And then you're in a situation where they're all using it. And none of them has any more market share or less than before. So nobody gained anything. Everybody lost. And they have to keep becoming ever more plastic fantastic also, right? And but nobody can go back to the old way because it's just too costly, right? Moloch is everywhere. And Moloch is not a new arrival on the scene either. We humans have developed a lot of collaboration mechanisms to help us fight back against Moloch through various kinds of constructive collaboration. The Soviet Union and the United States did sign a number of arms control treaties against Moloch, who was trying to stoke them into unnecessarily risky nuclear arms races, et cetera, et cetera. And this is exactly what's happening on the AI front. This time, it's a little bit geopolitics, but it's mostly money, where there's just so much commercial pressure. You know, if you take any of these leaders of the top tech companies, if they just say, you know, this is too risky, I want to pause for 6 months, they're going to get a lot of pressure from shareholders and others.
Well, you get the point. It's an arms race. It's driven by money. And the term that he uses, by Moloch. Now, we know the biblical story of Moloch. The Jewish people were sanctioned by God for sacrificing their children to Moloch. And it is not a mistake. It is not an accident that this is the term that's being used now. You saw Moloch operating with the bills in Washington. You see it operating here, and it comes from a lot of different ways and angles. The terminology used is not a mistake. This is got some demonic powers and forces behind it. And I'm concerned about it. I don't know what will happen. As I said, I've said this a number of times, I'm glad I'm an old guy at this point. I really am. But, you know, I also have, you know, some cute little great nieces and nephews, and mostly nieces, it seems like, but it's another story. But and I wonder about them, and I you know, pray for their parents who are trying to raise them in this world. It's tough. Okay, so here's another little bit of a Tegmark interview. I can see I'm going way over on this one.
It's spreading disinformation, harmful information of various types. And
I'll tell you what, let me summarize. You can go to YouTube, you can get the video, Lex Fridman, I think that's how I don't know, that's how he says his name, Fridman, YouTube channel, and you'll see, by the way, this video just put up the other day got like 800,000 views in the first day. So people are listening to this. I think it's an opportunity for the church to point out what's going on. Now, we won't get 800,000 views, but we can try. Here's an interesting, this is from an Arab newspaper, and I just am very interested at the imagery here. Do you kind of catch the imagery of the barcode? Remember, we always talk, well, that's the mark of the beast. And what's happening here is the barcode is like a rat, and it's squeezing squeezing the world, and the world is screaming. Now, I don't know who did this. I don't know what his point was. I know what I got out of it is that's a brilliant piece of editorial cartoon work right there, because it really encapsulates a lot of the things that we talk about here in our prophecy update. So we'll give this guy guest prophecy updater of the week, because this guy nailed it with that editorial cartoon. Now I'm going to play you a few minutes of a movie, animated movie that somebody did, and I personally think this thing is brilliant. It came out about 3-4 weeks ago. It's called, I don't know if any of you have seen it, it's called Beyond the Reset. Anybody see this? I'm surprised. I'm not surprised that you're not seeing this, because you don't look at the same garbage that I do. That's somebody said, you look at it so we don't have to that much. So I want you to watch the imagery in this. It's going to kind of jump around a little bit because I edited it down. It's about 24 minutes long in its unedited form, but this will be just a few minutes. Beyond the Reset. Look at this. Look at the imagery, what it is, what we've just been through as a world, where technology is going, what people have talked about, and what this is. A facility. You see the drones flying around up there, watching. This is where the AI stuff goes. You see the towers with the cameras and stuff on them? Social credit score, 2.3. See the book that he's got on the table there?
Good morning. We are bringing to you today's most important news from around the world.
What he does then is he sort of thinks back at like what life used to be like.
Bruce Kowalski, your weekly food ration has arrived.
See green cola, woke models, books there. Be gender neutral. Soybeans beyond meats, beyond plants, crunchy dry locust cookbook.
Rises 1 degree with each cow fart, contributing to global warming. This is why the authorities started a cow extermination program, and today the last herd of cows has been dealt with. The Earth has officially become a cow-free planet, and climate change is finally under control. You might get concerned. Where would we obtain our proteins from? Chicken and pork are not commonly accessible products, and beef is gone now. Do not worry. Hundreds of alternative protein manufacturing facilities have been constructed on each continent. They process thousands of tons of protein-rich food. This alternative food contains way more protein than beef. It is cheap to cultivate and it doesn't contribute to global warming. Kudos to science and green agenda. That is all for today. Stay tuned for tomorrow's news.
Bruce Kowalski, your monthly universal basic income has been deposited into your account. For more information, press details. You have been paid 2,000 central bank digital tokens. The following fees are being deducted: accommodation fee, food ration fee, recycling fee, clean energy fee, personal greenhouse gas emissions fee, climate change fee, diversity fee. Your current remaining balance is 5 central bank digital tokens, and if not spent, it will expire in 7 days.
What can I get for this? Gaming console.
Attention.
No
Important
VR
announcement.
headgear. I think that's one bullet, right? I think that video is absolutely brilliant. It should be shown to everybody. Now, it would be interesting. I'm pretty sure that maybe I have more optimism about certain parties. At a Republican Party meeting, convention, that would be viewed as a horror show. But at the other party, it would be viewed as, yeah, that's what we want. I think. It's crazy. I think it was in this video, the person asked, like, would you like to read a book? And so they said, you wanted this one. No, that one's not. That one's too racist. Oh, he wanted to rent a movie. Pulp Fiction. You can't watch that. How about The Godfather? Oh, no. That's racist stereotypes. Well, how about 1984? And the response was, well, 1984 doesn't exist. Folks, I just think this is a brilliant piece that whoever made this deserves a lot of credit for, because it really encapsulates a lot and brings to the front a lot of issues that we've been talking about that I think are related to Bible prophecy. And then here's this remember this is the drone array in the United Arab Emirates this past New Year's Eve in Abu Dhabi. Those are all drones. A human couldn't control those. One human. It's artificial intelligence controlled, computer controlled. And you can see the images. There's this one morphs into a AI head. But this is in the sky over a modern city in the world, Abu Dhabi. And the point is that if they can do this for wowing you, they can do this to kill you. It's the same technology, just have to repurpose it. I think this is where it morphs into the AI head. Oh, that's scanning your fingerprint. And the interesting thing is that when they're doing this to, wow, look at that, what are they also doing? They're sending the message, this is coming. Better get ready for it. Here it is. And then you see what it says inside the head. AI. That was from last New Year's Eve celebration. Okay, one more thing. I'm just going to play a very short clip of this. This is a video. Just watch it for a second.
A fleet of massive alien spacecraft just appeared out of nowhere and jumped into Earth's atmosphere. The ships are unlike anything.
Panic is spreading across the globe in the wake of the arrival of alien spaceships. Reports of unusual activity and sightings have led to fear and uncertainty, with many wondering what the aliens' intentions may be.
World leaders are working to calm the public and assure their safety, but the situation remains tense. Experts continue to investigate and gather more information as the world grapples with this unprecedented event.
My fellow Americans, today we face a challenge unlike any other in our history. As you may be aware, strange alien objects have arrived on our planet. While we do not yet know their intentions, we must remain calm and approach the situation with the utmost care. I have ordered our government officials to work.
Aliens greeted me. I was the smartest person in the room. I dissected some aliens and they didn't even scream. Nobody heard them scream. I created Space Force. I don't think Sleepy Joe will give me any credit.
Okay. So what's the point of this video? And by the way, I have a number of these. This was totally generated by AI. The sound, the pictures, the video, whatever, the artwork, all done by AI. And look at the theme that it came up with. It sort of reminds you of the movie Independence Day. This is a little thing. I'll just play a clip of this. This is where some of this stuff is going. AI, misinformation, disinformation, and how they're, I think, weaponizing it. Here's an example. This is from CNBC.
Now to a story that maybe should have every free speech advocate, I don't know, a little bit concerned. Axios reporting that President Biden may enlist a few hundred social media stars to tout his record as he heads for a re-election bid. The report in Axios says the White House wants to use these mostly younger, obviously digital media stars to target voters who may not follow the White House's official feed on social media or who may not watch or read more traditional and, dare I say, regulated media. And check this out. The report says the social media army could even have its own press briefing room at the White House. If true, wouldn't that essentially create a second White House press corps filled with those handpicked by the White House itself? Joining us now is the Axios reporter who broke the big story, Sophia Tsai, and author of the new book, Next, The Power of Reinvention in Life and Work, our friend Joanne Littman. Sophia, starting with you. By the way, amazing story, amazing scoop. I posted it all over the place. I got a variety of feedback. What kind of feedback did you get on the story? And was there anything that I said that mischaracterized the story?
No, I think all of that is correct, right? The briefing room obviously surprises some people. And I think the thinking behind that is, look, young people, i.e. people my age and younger, are not all watching cable news. They're not all reading the newspaper. Instead, they're scrolling through TikTok and Instagram to get their political rundown, not just political either. So, they want to meet people where people are at. And these are also prospective voters, of course, but, they are not saying that because this is the official White House that's doing this.
And I assume, now, I actually did not go to school for any journalism, so I'm a terrible example, but I do have a law degree. I feel like I kind of have, and we have editors here, and we've got the FCC up our grill if something goes wrong. Sophia, I'm assuming that you studied something having to do with journalism in college.
I studied politics.
Oh, so did I. Congrats, and here we are now. But point is, this is your profession, and to me, there's when I read your story, again, I urge everyone to go read it. I felt like there's no knocking these influencers. They're all famous in their own right and built great brands, but this is not what they do for a living.
And I think that is a risk that the White House will have to take. To your point, they're not necessarily regulated by editors. They don't necessarily have a newsroom standard. They are.
Well, you can find that at CNBC. But remember when Obama left office, he set up that organization. We talked about it here. I can't remember the name of it. And you wonder, whatever happened to that? Now we see that the White House is pushing to do social media influencers. What do you think they're pushing them to social media influence? Joe Biden's the greatest president ever. He's wonderful. Sit back and bask in the afterglow of his mighty greatness. This is what's happening. By the way, they're doing the same thing in And they'll attack the other side, and they're doing the same thing in Israel. I know Yair Lapid has a bunch of social media influencers peppering social media about things that are going on with judicial reform in Israel. I've seen the reports. Folks, you really, you got to really steel your mind and your heart in this day and age. This is, I'm pausing a lot today because I'm trying to find the words to kind of catch up with where my mind is racing ahead. This is end time stuff. This is how it's going down. Now, it may not go down for a few years yet. I don't know. I just can't imagine that it goes 40 years. I can't. I'm pretty sure I'm not going 40 years. That I'm almost guaranteed of. But this is really serious stuff. We are deep into this end times thing. Lighthouse Trails Research. I saw an article this week. Somebody posted it on one of their Facebook groups about something called, remember we have Lectio Divina, this mysticism that's coming into the church. Now it's called Mistio Divina, I think. They're not even hiding it. You have pastor after pastor after pastor. Ed Stetzer, Church Leadership Network, all this stuff. Andy Stanley pushing that ridiculous Enneagram that we've talked about here. And I'll say, stay away from them. Because that's leading you down the wrong path. I'm sorry. You may disagree with me on that. That's fine. I respect the right of all of my friends to be wrong on things. I'm sorry, he's not someone to follow. Saw an old clip of the Elephant Room with James McDonald, Stephen Furtick, Mark Driscoll, and they're talking about how great T.D. Jakes and Joyce Meyer are. This is from a few years ago. And all of those guys have been embroiled in scandals. Furtick hasn't too much. But Furtick says in the video clip, well, you know, and they put this in their church statement of purpose at one point at Elevation Church down in Charlotte. Says, at Elevation Church, we chew the meat and spit out the bones. Now, I've always, so you admit that you give people bones in their spiritual food. And we used to watch Chopped a lot. And I can never remember, they would have a piece of fish and they got a bone, you got chopped. So if you're a pastor and you're giving your congregation bones, you should be chopped too. Because that's not what you're supposed to do. But they celebrate it like, well, yeah, we don't get everything right. We give people bones. So just chew the meat and spit out the bones. So you get a point for warning people that you're giving them bones with their supposed meat, but you lose the point and get a few more deducted because you're giving them bones. You shouldn't be doing that as a pastor. So anyway, okay. Middle East, I'll discuss. This is had a big thing this week called Quds Day. It's about Jerusalem. So what you're seeing is that you're seeing this Jerusalem in the process of becoming the cup of trembling that it's talked about in Zechariah. No doubt in my mind. And if Jerusalem is the Temple Mount is like the epicenter of all of this stuff. So here's Nasrallah this week. He was talking about Quds Day. His Eminence said that this revival in the world sends two powerful messages. The first message to the steadfast and sacrificial Palestinian people, a message of cooperation, support, and backing, and that you are not alone, and a message to the enemy that Palestine has not and will not be abandoned. The Zionist entity is in a state of terror and fear in defending the entity that will disappear, God willing. His eminence indicated that there were major developments that took place during the past year at the international level, the region in Palestine. At the international level, the first title is The Decline of American Power, and America is no longer as strong as it was in previous years. And then he said the Zionist entity is having internal problems, and this is our opportunity. And so that's the question. So even in this is a video or a picture of a parade of Palestinians in Yarmouk. Now, what's Yarmouk? Yarmouk is one of the hellish spots on earth. It's about a square mile, maybe a little bit less. It's one of the most densely populated places on the planet. And what is Yarmouk? It is located within a certain city. What city? Damascus. This place was destroyed because it was occupied by Palestinian and Sunni Muslims, and they wanted to get rid of them. But now it's coming back. So they had the big posters up, but here's a little video clip, and you can see, and so you see the poster, right? What do you see behind it? Buildings that are trashed. They're just a shell. This war's been going on for 12 years. This is in the city of Damascus, and they're trotting out what? The Palestinian issue. And you'll see these refugee camps in different places. I had a discussion with a Palestinian activist. He said he'd lost children. I have no reason to doubt him, in a rocket strike in Gaza. I looked it up. It seemed to be true. 2 daughters and a niece, there were 3 or 4 killed. And it's just horrible. I mean, you sit there with a guy who's lost his daughters, but you don't know whether it was an Israeli rocket or a Gaza rocket that didn't quite make it, right? But I asked him about this. I said, so listen, I've not been to Yarmouk, but I've seen pictures of it. I've seen refugee camps in Jordan. I've seen well, first of all, I said, I've seen refugee camp in Nablus, Balata, right near the old Tel at Shechem. I said, it looks horrible. He goes, it's awful. Why is that? Oh, it's the occupation, the occupation, the occupation. Gaza looks bad. Oh, Gaza's terrible, the occupation. I said, so I go over to Jordan, and I've seen refugee camps in Jordan, but that's not, it's the occupation. Which means that it's just a bunch of propaganda nonsense. These people are being used as political pawns, and you see it this week. Here's a thing from an Iranian newspaper called Cayenne, and they're going after, the West shouldn't be talking about rights. And it says here, implosion ought to be coupled with an explosion to end Israel. This is the editorial, the opinion piece in this newspaper, page 2. Here's this is from Al Akbar newspaper, the Hezbollah newspaper, supported newspaper in Lebanon. And it's talking about an American mobilization to explore the horizons. Iran and Saudi Arabia are accelerating the path of normalization. And this is going forward at fairly breakneck speed. This is a big deal that's happening. The Saudis were meeting, I'm trying to remember who was meeting. Everybody's meeting with everybody else, and ultimately they oppose Israel. This is a big deal. And here's another video. This is Nasrallah also speaking. He said, if Israel harms the holy sites, they've escalated things on the Lebanese border. Well, wait a minute. You guys shot, drones and rockets into Israel. Your people. And Israel escalated it because they had the audacity to respond. This is the way they think. This is a video that was done by Ayatollah Khomeini, Iran. A disgraceful, whatever they called it, disgraceful silence. Ayatollah Khomeini's official website.
چرا هیچ کس این میلیون ها کودک و زن و مرد مظلوم در جهان اسلام را شمارش نکرد؟ چرا کسی قتل عام شدن مسلمانان را تسلیت نمی‌کند؟ چرا میلیون ها فلسطینی باید 70 سال
And I need to apologize because I forgot to do one thing here. Go to YouTube. I think Caroline Glick in her Twitter feed put a link up to the funeral of the two young women, 15 and 20, who were killed in a terror attack in the Jordan Valley. And then the funeral of her mother, their mother, who also died a few days later. It's heart-rending. So listen, I'm not unsympathetic to people that are losing this thing in a war. This happens in war. But you never see the other side. That's the point. So this is Syria's coming back to the Arab League. Raisi was out there saying we need to, anybody who's normalizing ties with Israel is a betrayal to the Palestinians. Saudis and Iranians are meeting. They're reopening embassies. Some great articles in the Jerusalem Post about this. This is by Seth Frantzman. Iran kickstarts multi-front Middle East war against Israel. As he says in the subheadline, the Islamic Republic's proxies and allies appear to have begun a multi-front conflict with Israel over the past week. Now, things seem to be a little calm. The holy days came, the Sabbath, the Islamic holy day, and then the Shabbat, and things seem to be calm in Jerusalem, but everything seems to be really tense. This is from Alma Research. I have a bookmark. They do great analysis, particularly they're located in the north of Israel, so they track all these things that have happened over the past week. And it seems like there's this dance going on, and somebody wants things to escalate. This is from the Wall Street Journal yesterday. Iran presses militants to attack Israel. The Quds Force commander came out and said this. Israel at the same time, front page Jerusalem Post on Friday. Israel seeking U.S. help for IDF buildup as expert fears Iran strike. They need weapons. They need missile stores. I don't think they're going to get them from us. In fact, things that we had stored in Israel to be used were taken to Ukraine. I don't have time to go through this in detail. Jonathan Spire, Seth Frantzman, who wrote the prior article, and Jonathan Spire, was privileged to have dinner with them in Jerusalem when I was there in December. The Iran-led bloc senses an opportunity. And Jonathan he's been places in the Middle East I wouldn't even think about going. And he's one of the best analysts out there. And he just says, listen, things are coming to the front. Iran may sense an opportunity. Israel seems to respond in such a way that they don't escalate things. But what happens when it gets out of whack? And Israel's concerned. The proxies around, I know who's reaching settlement agreement. Now the normalization is Saudi Arabia and Yemen, the Houthis in Yemen. Well, the Houthis are Iranian proxies. They have a lot of missiles, rockets, and everything. So what do you think? They can hit, from Yemen, they can hit the United Arab Emirates. They've shot missiles up there. Do you think they could hit Israel? Yeah, it's about the same distance. And so the question is, what's going to happen? And how does it get escalated? Israel's being pressured to give things to the Ukrainians. They seem to have resisted so far because they're concerned. If we do that, then we can't make these strikes in Syria without engaging Russia directly. It's a very, very big mess. Here's this article. Iran's weapons to Syria threaten the Middle East. It's all a big deal. And above the way the weapons were getting there, in large part recently, was Iran was sending aid to Turkey through Syria, but we just happened to throw in a couple hundred drones here in this shipment, and that type of thing. And then they accused Israel of politicizing relief to Turkey. It's messed up. And as I said, the Temple Mount is the core of all of this. And I won't go into all the stuff that I have there. I talked about it last week. Here's General Khani, new nightmare maker for Israel. What is it? Iran fosters unity among the resistance front. Everybody that opposes Israel is called the resistance front. And then here's a Nasrallah. That guy gives speeches all the time. And he said, boy, the Iran-Saudi agreement, that's going to have a big impact on the region. And it is. It's already having it. And it's making things very dicey for Israel. And I want you to catch the imagery in this next piece, which came from a Lebanese website. This is how they view things. Do you see this? The Dome of the Rock, the symbolism that's used there. This is from the New Arab. The intruders entered the compound in groups led by extremist rabbi and former Knesset member Yehuda Glick. Israeli extremists again raid Al-Aqsa compound in Ramadan. They had 1,000 Jews went up on the Temple Mount over the past few days, and they just walked around. I think they usually go up barefoot. But what do they say? They have stormed the third holiest place in Islam. And as I think I pointed out in my midweek update, find the article by Dr. Mordecai Kadar and the Arab guy who wrote a year or two ago about this myth. This is a whole big myth that this was where Muhammad went. Didn't happen. It was never an issue until Israel got control of the place. Then, we got to change the narrative. So that's the thing. That's more artificial intelligence. I've got one. Well, I'll save all that for a later update or midweek, whatever. But this is one article that was there. This is an intelligence service that says Qatar will not be providing any more money to Jordan's king. This is a big deal too, because the king has been under attack by the Muslim Brotherhood for a number of years, and he's always going around. He sort of plays Egypt off against Qatar because of the Muslim Brotherhood thing, and then he plays this one off. And now all the other Arabs are starting to get along, and he's kind of stuck in the middle. And there's a concern that the Jordanian government could fail. That's kind of the Jordanian monarchy. This is sort of the ruler, the Hashemite family, the Hashemite tribe, controlled Mecca and Medina until the House of Saud took it over back in the 20s. So then the Hashemites didn't have a place to go, so they were given two places, Jordan and Iraq. And how'd that one go in Iraq? So there's very close connection here, and United Arab Emirates seems to be leaning towards the Iranians also. And part of that is a reason. You go to the tip of where the peninsula, where the United Arab Emirates or UAE is located, and 75 miles across the Persian Gulf is Iran. Very close. And Iran could shut down the shipping there. And they could lose access to world markets to their oil. So it's all very... It seems like everything's boiling everywhere. That's the best way that I can describe it. So listen, we know that this is the way the world is going to be. Earthquakes. A lot of scientists talking about big ones coming. Chinese analysis of Turkey is these are the two largest earthquakes on land ever recorded. Now, that's on land. They said if the Cascade Fault in Oregon, Washington goes, it will be a tsunami like you've never seen. I used to use that video. If the one video that would always get us close to a copyright strike, it was that video of the tsunami and the Boxing Day tsunami earthquake in the Indian Ocean in 2004. And the interesting thing in that video, if you remember, the people were there, the water drained out of the bay, so they're out walking around. Oh, look at the coral, look at the shells here in the bay. And then all of a sudden people see this white cap across the horizon. They're going, what's that? I don't know. It's a wave. Then somebody says it's a tsunami. No, that's not a tsunami. And then what do you see? You see the locals running for the hills or the upper floors of buildings because they know what's coming. They're reading the warning signs. And I remember there's that one picture of that guy standing in the bay, and here comes the tsunami, and he's dead. Because he didn't follow the people who knew what to do and the warnings that were being given. And the scripture gives us all kinds of warnings. And we're at that point. The signs are really unmistakable. They're clear. They're happening. And they're happening at breakneck speed. It's impossible to keep up. I only give you a little teeny tiny slice here. And other people who do this faithfully do these updates. We can't get it all in. And you have a responsibility to arm yourselves with knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and steel your minds and hearts, because the deception and things that are coming. When Tegmark, in that interview with Lex Fridman, was talking about Moloch, in part of that interview he says, well, this Moloch thing really... it really means it's really deception. And I don't know if he knows all this, the spiritual thing behind this, but he swerved into the truth there. It is about deception, and that's what Jesus warned us most about. So pay attention, steel your minds, steel your hearts. Let's pray. Lord, thanks for this day. Pray that you will help us to steel our minds and hearts, to always stay faithful to you, that our doctrine would be correct, that we stand on the truth of the Word of God and your Son, Jesus Christ. We just pray that you will always help us to remember that. Give us opportunities to share the gospel with people because time is short. Bless us this week in Jesus' name. Amen.